In this video, I'll show you how to draft a pattern for a cap, as well as prepare and cut your fabric. Our first step today is to get a large piece of paper. I like to use dotted grid paper or a numbered grid paper, but any type will work. You'll want a piece that's about 20 by 20 inches. This is for the crown of the cap. You will also want a piece of paper that's at least 12 inches by 5 inches. This is for the cap wings, which are the brim of the cap. Before we go any further, we need to take some measurements. I broke out my calculator and did the math for you. My head circumference is 22 inches. This is a pretty standard head measurement, and since the cap won't be sitting squarely on one's head, it should fit most people. You can adjust as needed. We will be gathering the base of the cap to fit the wings. For a nice full gather, I multiply the head circumference by 2.5 inches. 22 times 2.5 is 55 inches. This will be the circumference of our cap crown. Now on to the trickier part. I need to find the diameter of the circle so that I can draw it out. To find the diameter of a circle, we'll divide the circumference by pi. 55 divided by 3.14 is 17.51, or about 17.5 inches. This will be the diameter of my circle. I'll draw out a cross shape with both axes 17.5 inches long. I like to mark my center point for clarity. At this point, I realize that I've drawn my lines at 17 inches, so I'm going to go back and fix this. I ended up just increasing the diameter to 18 inches, so I didn't have to fiddle around with half inches. Now I'm going to finish my circle. You can use baker's twine, yarn, even a shoelace for this step. I knot off one end and secure it at the center point with a thumbtack. I then hold the string taut and place my pencil at the end point of my line, keeping my grip tight on both the string and the pencil. I then just swing the pencil around, being sure to keep the string nice and tight. Easy peasy circle making. After making sure my circle looks good, I mark the pattern piece. This is really important for future use or if you have many similar pieces in your sewing project. Next up are our wings. They are little crescent pieces that frame the face, and they're the brim of the cap. The length of the wing will be half of the head circumference, 11 inches for this pattern. The total depth of the piece will be 4 inches. The cutout at the top of the wing will be 1 inch deep. I'm going to make a rectangle that measures 11 by 4 inches. You can always opt for a straight cap brim, but I like the swoop of the wings for this time period as they frame the face really nicely. This style was popular in the 1770s. If you would like a straight brim, I suggest cutting out a brim pattern that is a rectangle of 22.5 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. I want to mark the center point on each long edge of the rectangle. To make the curve, I'll be using a French curve. If you don't have one of these and can't get one, you can always print out a paper French curve and use that to create your wing. To create an even curve on each side of the center point, I like to mark where the curve hits on each corner of the rectangle on the French curve itself. This way I can flip the curve over and match both sides. I'm starting my bottom curve 1 inch away from the center point. To be sure that the wings don't stick out from the head at a strange angle, we'll be cutting out a top curve that is 1 inch deep. This makes sure that the wings lie flat. I marked down 1 inch at the center point and drew a line that extends a ½ inch from the center point on each side. I will then draw a shallower curve from the top corner of my wing to the edge of the newly drawn line. Repeat on the other side. Mark your pattern and you are done drafting. You can cut out your pattern now. Each pattern piece has an included 1/4 inch seam allowance, so be sure to note that on the pattern piece itself. Before we move on, you'll want to make a 2½ to 3 inch long point on one diameter line. This will be a finished slit that can expand and take in the cap as needed. After the pattern is drafted, we'll need to prepare the fabric. I'm using 3/4 yard of a sheer cotton voile, but you can use a light or medium weight linen or even silk gauzes and organza. We'll need an ironing board, a towel to protect the board, a spray bottle of water, and spray starch. I will also be using an ironing sheet to protect my iron from the starch, but a tea towel works just as well. It's important to have a crisp, flat fabric for this project, as we will be hand sewing curved pieces. I like to spray my cotton and linens with water while ironing instead of using the steam function. I find it faster to get a crisp iron. After our first iron, we will starch the fabric. The starch reduces fabric stretching on the bias as we sew and adds body and fluff to the finished cap. Starch will also keep stains from embedding into the fibers of your cap. When you hand wash this cap, be sure to starch and iron it again. I use an ironing sheet so that my iron doesn't pick up any starch residue or stick to my wet starchy fabric. Once the starch has set, it is safe to iron your starched fabric without the sheet. We will cut out 1 cap crown. I like to use a rotary cutter, but cutting with scissors works just as well. There's no need to pin your pattern to the fabric when using a rotary cutter. Simply use pattern weights to hold your fabric steady. I use a 20mm rotary cutter. Please be careful when using this tool. Next, we'll cut out 2 pairs of cap wings. There will be 4 total pieces. You can position the wings perpendicular or parallel to the selvage, but be sure that they are positioned straight along the grain line. If you're making this cap with a straight brim, cut out 2 of your 2½ by 22½ inch rectangles. Now that our pieces are cut out, I like to give them one more round of starch. It makes the fabric easy to work with and provides some stain protection from all the pencil marks and hand sewing we'll be doing. Last but not least, we'll prepare the ruffles. This is the fun part of the cap. You will need 2 ruffles, one for each wing. These will be 2 inches wide. For a gathered, fluffy look, you'll need a minimum length of 2.5 times the wing length, which is 27.5 inches per wing, a total length of 54 inches. For a neat, pleated ruffle, you will need at least 3 times the wing length, which is 33 inches per wing, a total of 66 inches. The total length will be the same for the straight brim. You don't need to cut the ruffle in half. Instead of cutting strips, which can end up off grain, I suggest measuring the width of your ruffle, snipping your fabric through the selvage, and tearing your fabric on grain. This works best with lightweight cottons and linens. My fabric is 56 inches wide, so I will tear off one 2-inch strip and cut it in half to create my 2 ruffles. We will give the ruffles another iron and another starching. Rolled hems are easier to hand sew with a well-starched fabric. In part 2 of this project, I will hem the ruffles, attach the wings to the crown, and finish the cap. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.